When you think of war heroes, you probably picture soldiers. But some of history's most unbelievable military stories belong to animals. A horse repeatedly carried ammunition through enemy fire. A dog became an official prisoner of war. A 4-pound Yorkie crawled underneath an airfield to complete a job soldiers couldn't safely do. And a bear was actually enlisted into the Polish AR. These are 7 animals whose extraordinary wartime stories made them heroes. Number 7 is possibly the smallest war hero on this list. Smoky was a Yorkshire Terrier weighing only about 4 pounds. She was found in New Guinea during World War II and eventually became the companion of American Corporal William Wynne. But in 1945, Smoky's tiny size suddenly became incredibly useful. At an Allied airfield on Luzon in the Philippines, engineers needed to run a communications wire underneath a taxiway. Digging it up could have taken days and disrupted aircraft operations while exposing personnel and planes to enemy attack. There was already a drainage pipe underneath the airfield. The problem? It was about 70 feet long and only 8 inches wide. Wynne attached a line to Smoky and called her from the other side. The tiny dog crawled through the dark pipe, pulling the line behind her. Minutes later, she emerged from the other end. A job that could have taken days had been completed with the help of a 4-pound Yorkie. Number 6 had only minutes to prevent a disaster. G.I. Joe was a U.S. Army pigeon serving during World War II. In October 1943, British troops captured the Italian village of Calvi Vecchia earlier than expected. That should have been good news. Except Allied aircraft were scheduled to bomb the German positions there. Now their own soldiers were in the target area. Communications couldn't stop the attack in time, so G.I. Joe was released carrying an urgent message. He flew about 20 miles in 20 minutes. The message arrived just as the bombers were preparing to take off. The attack was cancelled. G.I. Joe is credited with saving at least 100 Allied soldiers, and civilians, from being bombed by their own side. He later received the Dickin Medal for his service. Number 5 wasn't supposed to go to war at all. Stubby was a stray dog who wandered onto an American military training ground at Yale in 1917. Private Robert Conroy adopted him, and when Conroy's unit left for Europe, Stubby was smuggled aboard the ship. Somehow, he ended up in the trenches of World War I and Stubby proved surprisingly useful. After experiencing a gas attack himself, he learned to detect incoming gas and alert sleeping soldiers. He also helped locate wounded men on the battlefield, and according to the Smithsonian, Stubby once caught a German soldier who was mapping Allied trenches and held him until American troops arrived. By the end of the war, Stubby had served in 17 battles. His famous title, Sergeant Stubby, was unofficial, but his wartime exploits were very real. Number 4 became something no other dog in World War II is known to have become, an official prisoner of war. Judy was an English pointer serving as a Royal Navy ship's mascot in Asia. In 1942, HMS Grasshopper was attacked and sunk while escaping Singapore. Judy survived alongside members of the crew. When the stranded sailors desperately needed water, Judy began digging and uncovered a freshwater spring. But their ordeal wasn't over. Judy and Allied servicemen eventually became prisoners of the Japanese. She formed a particularly close bond with prisoner Frank Williams, who shared his limited food with her. Judy endured years of captivity and even survived another ship sinking while prisoners were being transported. She was eventually declared an official POW, number 81A. Judy survived the war, returned to Britain with Williams, and in 1946 received the Dickin Medal for courage and endurance. Number 3 became one of the most famous pigeons in American military history. In October 1918, hundreds of American soldiers from the 77th Division became surrounded by German forces in France's Argonne Forest. They became known as the Lost Battalion. Cut off from their lines, they relied on carrier pigeons to communicate. Worse, American artillery began accidentally shelling their position. Major Charles Whittlesey desperately needed to tell headquarters exactly where his men were. According to the traditional account, the final pigeon carrying that message was Cher Amy. Cher Amy reached the loft badly wounded, with the message capsule still attached. The shelling had stopped by the time the bird arrived, and the coordinates in the message helped the eventual relief of the trapped soldiers. The Smithsonian notes that parts of the famous story can't be conclusively proven from surviving records. What is documented is extraordinary enough. Cher Amy returned severely wounded, and survived. Number 2 was a horse who learned to navigate a battlefield without anyone leading her. During the Korean War, U.S. Marines purchased a small mare named Reckless to carry ammunition for a recoilless rifle platoon. She quickly learned the routes between ammunition points and the front lines. Then came the battle for Outpost Vegas in March 1953. On one extraordinary day, Reckless made 51 trips between the ammunition supply point and the firing positions. The Marine Corps says she traveled more than 35 miles and carried almost 5 tons of ammunition. And roughly 95% of those trips were made without anyone leading her. She would climb toward the fighting loaded with ammunition, and sometimes return carrying wounded Marines toward safety. Reckless herself was wounded twice. She survived. She eventually became Staff Sergeant Reckless, and today a statue of her stands at the National Museum of the Marine Corps. A horse who didn't just accompany Marines into battle. She became one of them. And number 1 began as an orphaned bear cub in Iran. In 1942, Polish soldiers traveling through the Middle East encountered a young Syrian brown bear. The cub eventually became part of the 22nd Artillery Supply Company of the Polish Second Corps. They named him Wojtek. As he grew, Wojtek lived alongside the soldiers. But when the unit needed to travel by ship, there was a problem. Animals weren't normally allowed aboard. So Wojtek was officially entered onto the company's records as a soldier. He was given a service number and eventually held the rank of corporal. Then came the Battle of Monte Cassino in Italy. According to Poland's Institute of National Remembrance, Wojtek helped the unit by carrying ammunition boxes and pulling a supply cart. The image of a bear carrying an artillery shell became the emblem of his company. After the war, Wojtek traveled with the soldiers to Britain before eventually living at Edinburgh Zoo. Former Polish soldiers reportedly visited their old companion there. Of all the animals on this list, Wojtek's story might sound the most fictional. But the bear really was officially enlisted with the Polish unit. A refugee, a mascot, a soldier, and eventually, Corporal Wojtek. None of these animals understood politics. They didn't know why the wars were being fought. But alongside the humans around them, they carried messages, found survivors, delivered ammunition, endured captivity and, in some cases, saved lives. And decades later, their stories are still being told. Because sometimes, history's most unlikely heroes aren't human at all. Which one of these stories surprised you the most?